killing of a refugee community leader in Denver was the work of a group of young adults. So say investigators today, who announced 3 arrests and then a 4th suspect picked up within hours. Police say that Ma Kang died when teenagers involved in some kind of gang started shooting at a car they saw in their neighborhood. Kang happened to be across the street unloading her groceries. Today, police arrested Nura Allah, Luray, Pare, and Swabe, all 4 20 years old or younger. Investigators say back on July 15th, the suspects saw a car they didn't think belonged in their area around New Freedom Park. Police say they started shooting, fired more than 3 dozen times. Bullets were hitting buildings, cars, and Ma Kang. Police say they believe a 5th person also fired shots. They have not identified that person. Police say the 4 suspects in custody are all involved with the gang. After Ma Kang's death, community members came together at a public forum to ask for more help from Denver police keeping their neighborhood safe. And with the blessing of Ma's son, John, your Word of Thanks donations a couple weeks back helped create the Ma Kang Scholarship, which will help refugees and immigrants from that neighborhood pursue higher education. An anti-drag show commissioner in Douglas County may have shimmied up the pole with no easy way to get down. Republican Commissioner George Teal claimed to have the votes to block Pride Fest from Douglas County property. But the 2 other Republican commissioners say they never talked to him about it. Attorneys had quickly pointed out that such a ban would lead to a pretty easy lawsuit. At last weekend's drag show, a performer's outfit slipped, revealing a plastic chest piece. A fun fact, reminder, toplessness is not illegal in Colorado, and even when it used to be illegal, the law uncovered human bodies, not plastic that causes pearl clutching. For what it's worth, the Pride Fest organizers apologized for the wardrobe malfunction, but made it clear they are not going to get run out of town.
Regardless of whether or not we're at the fairgrounds, we will be having a 2023 Pride Fest. We believe he's just using it for political rhetoric and to further his own cause. And we need to stand up to the bullies.
Commissioner Teal said last night that he believed he had the votes to ban Pride Fest. Fellow Commissioners Laura Thomas and Abe Layden both said they had not discussed it with him. Layden, who often follows Teal's lead and votes with him, specifically repudiated this idea today. Layden said that he wouldn't use government power, quote, to support thinly veiled bigotry and anti-gay rhetoric. Commissioner Teal did not respond to my questions about his anti-drag initiative getting dragged by fellow Republicans. RTD is defending its decision to make that agency's police chief the highest paid chief in Colorado. RTD is pointing to other transit agencies with similar compensation. You know, those other ones. The ones that RTD would not specify by name. They told us to go find them ourselves. The new chief, Joel Fitzgerald, will make $250,000 a year. It's pretty wild when you consider he will oversee 21 sworn RTD officers. He's going to make more than the chiefs in Denver and Aurora, who have hundreds of officers under their command. We should note the RTD chief also does have contracted security guards who work for another company. Our Steve Stager looked into this yesterday, did not find a comparably paid transit police chief from a similarly sized department. We asked RTD for some proof here. Instead of providing examples, they directed us to the American Public Transportation Association's research page. We continue to sift through that, looking for the examples that RTD is secretly citing. Not one of the county sheriffs in Colorado comes close to matching a $250,000 salary like the RTD police chief. At least not yet. Weld County will decide next month on whether to increase Sheriff Steve Reams' salary from $160,000 to $250,000. That's a sweet raise. Weld County can do that because of a special allowance in Colorado law. Steve Stager schools us on it.
As I researched police leader salaries this week, I noticed a trend. Arapahoe County Sheriff Tyler Brown makes $153,000 a year. Adams County Sheriff Rick Reigenborn makes $153,000 a year. Douglas County Sheriff Tony Spurlock, go ahead, guess. Yep, $153,000 a year. Why so similar?
County officials have their salaries addressed by the General Assembly because the state constitution requires it.
Jenny Pingenot with Colorado Counties, Inc. says there's a reason it's state law.
Counties are an administrative arm of the state, meaning we provide the services that constituents expect from state government.
Your county clerk does the business of the DMV and runs statewide elections. The health department enforces state health laws, so on and so on. So how can the so-called Weld County Council propose a pretty significant raise for county officials if state law determines their salaries? They're suggesting a $90,000 raise for County Sheriff Steve Reams when his new term begins next year.
Weld County is known as a home rule county. Home rule authority in the county arena is just flexible in a structural and organizational manner.
Hence the Weld County Council, a group of elected citizens that exists solely to manage the county's home rule charter.
They then have the authority to go ahead and set those salaries.
Weld County Attorney Bruce Barker says the council determines the structure of county government, like who's appointed rather than elected. And it all stems from a desire back in the 70s to put more people in charge.
There was some dissatisfaction with the fact that there were only 3 county commissioners.
Weld County has 5 commissioners now. They all stand to get a $55,000 raise under this proposal, the next class of county commissioners, by the way, from $105,000 to $160,000 a year. The clerk and assessor would also get raises under this proposal. The Weld County Council meets in mid-September to finalize this. By the way, Pitkin County is the other home rule county in Colorado, Kyle.
I feel like you touched on this briefly, Steve, but who the deuce is this Weld County Council? Like some unknown group of people with massive powers?
I had the same question, and a lot of us who read this, because you think about a county has a board of commissioners or a board of trustees, something like that. This is specifically a group that exists to maintain the home rule charter, basically decide the structure of the county. They decide how many county commissioners are in the county, which positions are appointed, like the coroner in Weld County is appointed, not elected. So basically, Weld County has a say in all of this. It's just a group of citizens who make these decisions.
And the sheriff and everybody else who's getting raised had to go in there before this council and make the case of why they should back up the Brinks truck for them like they are for that RTD chief.
They do. They go in and they say, this is why I need this much. They have an open hearing about that. It's open to the public. Then this commission or this Weld County Council will vote on it in mid-September.
Wow, super powerful, like an HOA board.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, thank you, Steve. Boulder County will not be able to enforce most of its new gun laws. A judge has granted a temporary restraining order sought by Rocky Mountain gun owners. That's the far-right gun rights group based here that says the NRA is too moderate on gun issues. Earlier this year, the county and a few cities in Boulder County passed ordinances banning the sale of so-called assault weapons and banning large-capacity magazines. RMGO already challenged the laws in Superior. The group says Louisville and the city of Boulder have agreed to stop enforcement of the new gun laws until a judge makes a decision. New polling of Latino voters in Colorado shows overwhelming majorities want to keep abortion legal, regardless of their personal view on it, and want elected leaders to speak out against white nationalism and white supremacy. The results of the polling by the civil rights and civic engagement groups Unidos and Mi Familia Vota are especially interesting given the tightly contested congressional race in Colorado's newest congressional district. The 8th CD was carved out specifically to maximize the power of the Latino vote. It stretches from Adams County up into Weld County. Democrat Yadira Caraveo is facing Republican Barb Kirkmeyer. Kirkmeyer is a staunch opponent of abortion, so you can expect that to be an issue in the race. The polling also found President Joe Biden at just more than 50% approval, with Latino voters polled favoring a generic Democrat over a generic Republican, 50% to 15%. But listen to this, with a whopping 28% undecided. That would be the definition of a powerful swing vote. When we heard CDOT could override our car radios to warn about something like a flooded underpass, we had to know more. If Jeffco's closing a bunch of largely empty school buildings, does that mean taxes will go down? What happens to the buildings themselves? We got some answers.
It's not over yet, and there's still so much to fight for.
A CU professor sees the effects of climate change firsthand at the base of the world's tallest mountain. Next. CDOT has some magic powers. Kinda. When we found out that CDOT is going to penalize the contractor building I-70 because the highway flooded earlier this month, their pumps failed, we stumbled across this emergency safety feature that CDOT can use to get your attention. It's pretty close to magic, as long as you still listen to over-the-air radio. Here's Marshall Zellinger.
Okay, I know radios don't sound like this anymore, but you get the point. If you, like me, still listen to the radio in the car, you could get an emergency warning if something major happens in the new lower portion of Central 70.
The antenna signals in the tunnel are strong enough to override your radios as you're coming closer.
CDOT has installed a radio frequency takeover system approaching the I-70 tunnels near the Purina plant.
So if there's a car fire, it'll tell you that there's a fire and to evacuate the tunnel. These alerts will also go off if there's a tornado in the area and will tell you what to do and what your next steps are. They can also go off if there's a bomb threat in the tunnel or if there's a hazmat spill as well.
It's one of the safety features we learned about this week. Another, a PA system. These black cone-shaped speakers on the roof of the tunnel have already been used to tell people to stop walking on the interstate. They can also be used in the event of an emergency, just like the radio takeover.
Any model car, doesn't matter how old it is, the system will not work if you are listening to Bluetooth, if your radio just doesn't work in general, or if your radio is turned off, or if you're on a phone call.
CDOT could not test the system for me today since everyone around us would hear the message. I'm told you have to be close for your sing-along to be interrupted.
So if you're over on Quebec Street on I-70, your radio won't be overridden if you are that far away from the tunnel. So let's say you are 10 cars behind and there's a car fire or you're approaching a fire, your radio will be overridden with the important messaging to let you know how to evacuate.
I am still curious about the science of this, but I reached out a little too late to a couple of universities for help on how the science works. I got an email that said this is used in Switzerland, did some quick research and saw an article about emergency vehicles using this in Europe. For everyone who doesn't get over for an ambulance in America, in Europe, at least in, maybe it was Sweden that the article said, I can't quite remember, that the ambulance uses it to tell people as they're approaching them, we're behind you, get out of the way in case you can't hear us.
So like your radio's turned up loud, the ambulance is behind you, and all of a sudden your radio just like flips over and is like, move, get out the way.
It relies on you listening to the radio. I listen to the radio on my way into work. Do you?
Not so much. What do you listen to?
It's a mix between 80s and 90s.
Okay.
R&B.
Okay.
And today's hits.
And today's hits. You sold that just like you're doing a promo for the station. Thank you, Marshall.
Our next question tonight is about schools closing in Jeffco. 16 slated to shut down because of low enrollment. Debbie in Arvada wanted to know, will closing schools decrease school taxes?
I'm still laughing about Marshall listening to today's hits. Debbie, I'm sorry. That's a very good question. Your taxes are not going to decrease. Jeffco School says still going to serve the same number of students, about 69,000 kids. District says it's currently spending more than it collects in revenue. They hope that closing down some of these buildings and cutting those expenses brings costs in line with tax revenue. A couple other next viewers wrote in asking what will happen to the Jeffco school buildings themselves once the kids and teachers are gone. No decision yet. If the board approves the recommendation on the school closures, and again, it's all or nothing, they're not going to pick and choose individual ones, then the district says a working group led by a contractor will come in to figure out what could happen potentially with each building. That process, which the district says will include community input, likely wouldn't start till January.
I also like Marshall's music choices. We're looking pretty good. Plenty of sunshine out there, bright and blue across downtown Denver. Today was a hot one once again in the 90s. 56 days so far this summer season. Typically on average we see about 46, already 10 days above that. And many more on the way as we head into September. 90s up and down the I-25 corridor, some 80s, lower 90s off to the eastern plains, a little more comfortable up in the mountains, but still this ridge of high pressure parked across the Great Basin. Tomorrow we will be watching just a little storm system kind of cruising in, riding atop that ridge. So watch out for a couple of thunderstorms, primarily across the eastern plains, but tonight it's going to be pretty quiet. Tomorrow morning we're watching a weak front push through. That brings us a few clouds, possibly a couple of thunderstorms right there on I-25. Near Fort Collins and Greeley, more so off to the eastern plains, and they'll continue to sink to the south as we look ahead toward tomorrow afternoon. That kind of will be the bullseye for trouble. I-76, I-70 heading out into Kansas. 90s on deck for us again tomorrow with 70s up in the mountains, and the 90s, whew, they're here to stay through the Labor Day weekend.
Professor's visit to the base of Mount Everest provides an up-close look at the impact of climate change. And you know, nothing makes me feel quite as guilty about not exploring every corner of Colorado as a house pet that's more well-traveled than I am.
He's naturally a curious cat, but as soon as we got him on the trail, he would just follow the trail.
The anti-house cat. It's the most Colorado thing we saw today. Next.
A CU professor recently went to one of those climate summits where smart people from around the world talk about the challenges of climate change. This summit was more summity than most.
There's fewer and fewer wild places and more people, and so the conflict between wildlife and humans is inevitable. My name is Joanna Lambert. I'm a professor in the program of environmental studies and faculty in the Department of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology. My research is with regards to wild animals and wild places. I gave the inaugural Everest address on wildlife and climate, and so my message in my particular talk was to highlight the fact that there are many causes of biodiversity decline, and the sort of the reduction of populations of wildlife around the world. Climate is exacerbating that. We were almost at 19,000 feet where the summit took place, basically on the Khumbu Glacier out at Mount Everest. It was difficult to take a deep breath at that altitude, of course. While we were all delivering our addresses, there were landslides occurring. We were hearing, boulders actually dropping off. There were avalanches literally in the middle of the climate summit. Climate is making things even more challenging, not only for wildlife, but for humans that are living in habitat that wildlife are needing to exploit. It's increasingly easy to become paralyzed in the world that we live in. And I think if we flip it around, if we flip the message around and remind folks just of, exactly how much we have left, that can reinvigorate our passion for working towards solutions.
Professor Lambert shared her view through the lens of our photojournalist Brian Wendland. The most Colorado thing we saw today is a cat that got out of the house and climbed a mountain. That and your feedback next. The most Colorado thing we saw today is a cat on top of a 14er. That's it. That's the thing. You would like to know more. Okay, this is Pierre, specifically Pierre the adventure cat. Recently made it to the top of Mount Democrat near Alma, south of Breck. Pierre hiked part of the trail with his owners, Carla and Michael Forgy. They did carry him in the little cat thing from time to time.
Every person that walks by is like, is that a cat? In the bag, or if he's walking. So it's a lot of fun seeing people's reactions. We definitely have a lot of shock.
I'm meant to be. We had good interactions from the beginning, and ever since then, he's kind of excelled at everything we brought him on.
I hope that everyone knows that cats can do a lot more than we think they can, and they're curious and they love to be outdoors.
What I would give to know what the cat thinks of being dragged along on this. Up the mountain, Mount Sherman, Mount Democrat, also out paddleboarding. I don't know. Cat's got some thoughts. That's all I'm saying. A lot of you wrote in about Marshall's story about CDOT being able to override people's radios in case of emergency. Joe says it's just called blanketing. The strong signal invades and overruns everything else. Michael says that CDOT has used this in Glenwood Canyon. He says that his radio was overridden to warn him about a stalled vehicle ahead. Buck writes, every time RTD can't do worse, they manage to lower expectations. When they said that there were comparably paid police chiefs, we thought they would tell us which ones. We didn't expect them to say, go fish. See you next time.